Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti.
Hello everyone, welcome to this meeting. Who would have thought at the beginning of the summer that we'd be finding ourselves here on the 20th of August to celebrate a night of success, of sporting success, of excellence that we were not expecting. We lived this summer so many moments of joy, of celebration, some very important moments. Even more so in such a period of suffering, like what we're all living through right now. We saw certain things happen that we've never seen before in history. We celebrated together. The European Championship, the first time an Italian tennis player comes to Wimbledon, beating Serbia at home in basketball, and finally the Olympics. 40 medals, 10 gold, 100 meter and 4x100 relay victories, races which are icons of sport.
A festeggiare insieme, perché ci sono.
Because there are few things like sport that make us immediately bind us together. They unify us. We realize just how beautiful these links that bind us together are. But for this to happen, for us to be able to say that we can celebrate sporting victories, they need certain people, certain protagonists, talented people who have the courage to accept the challenge put before them and to go beyond the limits, like the title of our talk today is. Today, among our guests are some of these great people. Sometimes the limits of sports have demanded that we can't be here, but soon they'll be joining us. But one great protagonist of Italian sport, the greatest Italian Olympian here, is present among us now. 6 Olympic gold medals, plus a few others, along 5 Olympic Games, 16 global golds, 10 European ones, and an infinitely long list of victories. She's continued to fight for Italian sport, and now with a different role, the role for which we've welcomed her today, and it's a pleasure to have her here, the Undersecretary for Sport of the government, Valentina Vezzali. And please, I welcome her to come to the stage now. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Once again, actually, it's the second time Valentina's here. This time in this role. And because of this, before inviting her to start, we ask her to just give us a brief account of what treasure we've discovered this summer and what work is asked of us to continue to enrich what we have ahead of us sometimes without even knowing. But what we ask from her starting this moment together is exactly this, a reflection on the great responsibility of this sporting miracle we've witnessed today. So allow me to thank you, the organisers, for the invite to the meeting. which happens, as I've underlined, in an exciting time for Italian sport. The theme of this meeting today, going beyond one's limits, is very dear to me. This element of contest comes hand in hand with the element of limit, both for the being prepared internally to confront new risks and to be strong enough psychologically to overcome all the fears that they can emerge within us. Every one of us has the propensity to run into risks depending to our own capacities, but can also meet success. Risks can become habits that cultivate a good faith in oneself. More than once I've come across that the person I'm most afraid of is myself. My own uncertainties, the fear of failure, the fear of success, the fear of what others may think. And all these fears that I've lived, which sometimes bloom within me, I've always managed to overcome them, thanks to the beautiful environment that surrounded me. My fencing teacher, my coaches have always underlined that no matter what happens, they would never abandon me, but always have held me up. Our efforts always one of focalizing our attention to overcome new challenges and on the positive things that can come from it. And it's only by running through risks that we can overcome our own limits. Sport must serve like a school of life, and like it must be taught. We're taught rules. With sport, you learn respect, to respect the rules. You're in front of your own opponent, facing just like the difficulties of life. You learn to manage victory well and to face a challenge. In these 10 years of political challenge, I'm putting available to Italian sport, everything I've learnt in over 30 years at high-level sport. This is my new challenge, which is based on a fundamental element, competency, which is the founding principle on which you can reach the aim of improving Italian sport. Sport needs passionate people, motivated people, and who know the dynamics, both from underneath and from within. But the everyday reality, as an athletic woman myself, is still lived with confidence. Now that we're reaching more gender equality in sport, it still seems distant. Of 44 national sporting federations, only one has elected a woman president. And in this way, I've asked Tucani to push in this direction, especially when it comes to designating areas where there's still a lack, still an overwhelming majority of male representation. I'd like to achieve these objectives I put ahead of myself and that I've made public, especially in Parliament. Sport is above everything. Even through these 18 months of the pandemic, needs direct intervention that will last through time. This is why it's worth remembering. We're talking about a sector that produces 2% of Italy's gross GDP, and that must be structured and supported sufficiently. We cannot waste any more time. Urgency seems obvious now, especially regarding the numbers that prove the sedentary nature of today's youth. Just so we understand each other, in 2019, so a young person, even before the pandemic, 1 through 5 young people between 3 and 17 years old was sedentary. And after the pandemic, sadly, this number's only increased. There's a statistic that has to represent our starting point for every sport, all sense of sporting policy. Italy is fifth lowest in Italy of the number of people who practice sport. We have to work on the causes that have led to this situation. For a country like ours, that since 1997 has been the top 10 of Olympic medal winners. One of the causes is cultural characteristic. Italy is a country of sports people from the sofa. We love to watch the Azzurri play, but many hate to get out there and imitate them. Having more healthy people is a great boon for the country and would cause a saving of almost 50 billion euros to the state for only 250,000 people, 0.3% that live a completely sedentary life to one that is finally active. In this scenario, for Italians, some great things have happened. Children with a great idea of sacrifice, of the talent of their of athletes and the federations and their teams. But there is also need for the reform of sport, started in 2018, that has it's helped to bring much more money to the sporting world, more than 160 million euros in 2 years. But, as with every reform, with this, we need some time to judge and properly value its effects. But there's already some sure things that we can reflect on. The first analysis on this investment comforts me. The contributions to individuals and the targets we've reached. One piece of data is significant. The Federation of Gymnastics has received before the first Olympics, more than 16 million euros and managed to reach among the 76 top at Tokyo Olympics, and has come with 6 gold medals at Tokyo. There are other disciplines which, thanks to other investments, are seeing some times of great rigorous improvements. These reforms have confirmed the central need for preparation for the Olympics and in support for the federations at high level. This role must be sustained at the centre of our Anglo-Saxon-inspired sporting model based on the competencies of the sporting world and respecting the prerogatives of the data in Olympics and Paralympics. And since the first day of my role here, I've worked to preserve the autonomy of CONI, not only in words, but in deeds, concrete fact. We must look at the laws that look at the hiring of new CONI personnel and how it's managed. From this year, it can hire professionals it needs to follow its own objectives and work from the beginning, not only for the 2022 and 2024 Olympics, but even further on for the Milan Cortina 2026 and LA in 28. At the centre of the reforms, the role of the sport and the Department for Sport is, among others, to permit Italy to improve and the number of Italians participating in sport. I'd like to underline this. We are the 5th worst country in Europe for number of people who participate in sports. Sport and health is a way of supporting our own base, but in these years, it's been seen simply as a way of contribution rather than a service. But it can't just be this. The Italian sporting movement must see sport and health with a point of reference, not a big entity that overwhelms the others in a way that's been pointed out by other federal presidents. And maybe it's this push and this acceleration to the unity of sport and health that I'd like to push for a major overhaul using the resources that are already available within. using the skills already available brings with it the necessity to check that everyone does well his own job. The government has the intention of monitoring acutely how public resources are being deployed, above all in a term of cooperation after this Olympics that invites all national Olympic committees to cooperate with government organizations with which it must maintain good relations. But another important challenge is to bring sport to the center of school life. Going from primary school is a sign of civility and a tool for health and for learning for our young people. For this end, I've aimed from the beginning, I've worked that the teachers of physical studies are put in the beginning, are put at all schools. We've been working with the Minister for Education, and we are working with laws from President Draghi so that this year, this extraordinary year for sport, can be used to help this conquest that's been in the work for over 40 years. It's an opportunity not to lose, like that offered by the National Recovery Plan that is due an investment of over 300 million euros for school sports and 700 million euros dedicated to the regeneration and restructuring and rebuilding of sporting facilities and urban parks equipped properly that can make sporting activity a real way to integrate of integrity and social inclusion.
In order to understand the level, on a national level, the facilities that we have, we must also consider cycling. Today, we only have one cycling facility on our whole territory, and it is not in good condition. This must help us to understand the greater reality in Italy, and we need to change things in order to use the current funds that we have at our disposal. It will be necessary to engage the funds from the PNNR, but also other associations, and prepare us for the in preparation for the events that we have in the next couple of years, the European athletics and the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in 2026. This is the great event towards which our whole country should be preparing and look towards. We have also, unfortunately, been looking at some delays in the changing of our constitution to enable us to continue this work. We have been trying to verify the necessities, the ways in which we can improve on these services. And right here, I'd like to also take advantage of this occasion to thank the public for your attention and that have enabled me to bring more attention to sport here in Italy. I have tried to improve sport in Italy despite the challenges that I have found on a political level. We have been asking to bring a light onto this sector, which has been very much in the shadows, and bring about reform in sport. We have been trying to make this a concrete reality. in front of the army of volunteers that have been trying to make these improvements. This is thanks to their passion and their perseverance. Two elements, courage and perseverance, are necessary in order to go through with this challenge and go beyond limits. Thank you.
Grazie, grazie.
Thank you to the Undersecretary Vezzali, because what she's been saying allows us to create the conditions that our talent can face their challenges. And we'll be joined by some of these talents, starting with Gregorio Paltrinieri, the star of motor racing globally. Hello, can you hear me? Here he is. A silver and a bronze in Tokyo and a gold in Rio. And it's something we'll be talking about very soon. So after thanking our next guest, Antonio Giovinazzi. Hello everyone. Thank you for being with us, Antonio, a pilot of Alfa Romeo's team and the only Italian like we know who races in Formula One. We're glad that he's here with us. I'd like to start this discussion with them, starting with a question to Gregorio. So Secretary Vezzali, starting this, told us about the challenges she faced as an athlete and now with her political role. She said an interesting thing, that many times the greatest limit, the greatest enemy is myself. Gregorio participated in this sporting miracle, a miracle within a miracle, because Gregorio arrived in Tokyo after he'd had to delay his training for a month, not because of COVID, but because of another illness. But regardless, he arrived at the start, needing to challenge himself. One of his own limits was not an opponent of his. What did this challenge mean to you? So exactly, I'm going to say hello, thank you for being here, thank you for welcoming me, and I was listening to what Valentina was saying, and we saw ourselves, she saw my suffering and competing in these situations, and I agree 100%. Always in these situations like mine, it's always against yourself you have to fight, at least it's always been the case for me. When I race, I don't worry as much for everything others will be doing, because these are all things that are out of my control. I can only control what I'm going to do. And so to go above my limits, my own fears, has always been the main thing. I was out for almost a month before arriving to Tokyo, and before I got there. And so it was a totally new situation for me and very stressful. But in the end, I came out thinking, all right, I'm going to go there and do the best I can. And certainly coming home from Tokyo, I'm happy. I wouldn't have been had I withdrawn from this challenge. But today, as I see it, I'm never afraid of getting involved, at least of trying, because that's the only thing you can do in the end to make you happy. You can win, you can lose, but if you tried properly, in the end, that makes you happy and is the most important thing.
This is beautiful, the idea of doing your best. I wanted to ask Antonio Giovinazzi, what does it mean, this courage, while the car is going at 360 kilometers per hour, and being there with all your being full of courage? What does it mean to be in the piste and in the racetrack? First of all, I'd like to say thank you for everybody. This is an honor to speak with you. I always was in love with race car driving since I was a child. I started with go-karting, which is when I was only 9 or 10 years old. And the courage for speed is one of the first things you need to have. And the speed is actually the thing that I love most about my profession. What I'm most passionate about is this element of speed. This is actually a team sport. It's not only me in the car. It's the people that I count on outside also that are on my team. And I try to give it my best along with my coach. There are also many factors during the race that can help you to do your best. But the most important thing is to be confident in yourself, to go beyond your limits and have all the necessary conditions to make sure you give it your best shot, as all sportsmen do. Going back to Gregorio, who will have to leave us in a while, I wanted to ask you, because I often heard you talk in the last couple of weeks, we learn to control our emotions. What does this mean for an athlete? This means that during my career, I have had many opportunities to compete, and I have always tried to look at the positive. When I go to a race, I don't want to be conditioned by fear. Controlling my feelings, my emotions, being in control of my feelings means being able to express myself 100% and not let myself be too conditioned by negative emotion. This is what I try to focus on before a race. I need to go into a sort of a Zen state and not think about the consequences, about what journalists might say, about what my coach might say afterwards. These are distractions, and they take your concentration away from the aim. And I try to concentrate on what I need to do and do it the best I can. This is a very interesting point here. Fragility actually can become a point of strength. Yes, absolutely. We shouldn't be afraid of our own limits, of our own fragility. Everybody is scared at the Olympics. Everybody has their own demons in their head that they need to combat. We're all in the same situation. There are some people who are able to manage them better. Some people are able to not let themselves be conditioned. In my career, I've had moments where I've been better, I've been less good at doing this. Anything can happen. We're not machines, we're not robots, we're people. We have to do our best. Sometimes it doesn't go how we'd like, but this isn't a problem. The problem for me would be going to the race and not being able to give what I can give, not being able to express myself fully. Until I'm there, my mentality, my motto has been do the best I can. On this point, I'd like to also talk to our third guest, Matteo Pessina, a footballer, midfielder of the national team, Atalanta, and he helped us win the European Championship with his 2 goals. Right now, he's actually training. He would have been, he's training now, but he wanted to, however, send us his contribution. Let's see what he tells us in his response to this question about the fear of failure. Fear of failure is something that we all have, especially in our day, in our world. We have a lot of competitions, and as soon as you lose one, you start thinking about the next one. The only antidote is confidence in yourself and in what you do. If you have confidence in what you do, you'll never lose. If you lose a match in this way, you'll always gain something from it. There's always something to gain, even in a loss. We should never be afraid of just losing. We need to give it our best and give it our all. Valentina Vezzali, I'd like to ask you the following. In this effort to be constantly improve oneself, and talent, I mean, what is talent at the end of the day? Talent is a quality that is born from within our hearts. Everybody has a talent towards something, and it has to be cultivated. As regards my situation, I was fortunate enough to meet the right person at the right time. I was born in Jesi, and the great founder of the fencing club, who had fenced with bamboo sticks in the concentration camps during World War II, he had begun, along with the Italian official, to design a whole new version of fencing. He decided to start this club based on this passion. This is what passion is, the idea of giving something to others. They started in a basement, and then it became a gym. This is what taught me everything that I have today. All these qualities live in me. And he was able to make these talents Olympic talents in such a small town like Jesi. This is what passion is able to achieve. He enabled us to get closer to sport. We were children we weren't particularly oriented towards fencing, but he was able to make them to get to a high level, make them help them socialize through fencing, and allow for this encounter between these teachers and these students. If we all brought our children to practice a sport, with proper facilities, of course, because even in my own club, we had the rain, the roof wasn't in the best condition, and we often had rain and often going through the roof. We need to give credit to these coaches that can allow us to become Olympic athletes, but especially men and women capable of respect and respect for society.
Finding good teachers is essential in sport, like Minister Vezzali was telling us. When you find the person who awakens the spark within you, he gives you a way, teaches you a certain way of life, showing you that with hard work, that can become a fire. Let's hear again from Pessina, who talks about this, the relationship and what he's learnt working with what's been given to him by nature, his own abilities. So I think that the talent is is nothing without knowing how to work hard, knowing how to be able to sacrifice. It's something that's intrinsic to yourself. So you're lucky if you have talent, but you have to put into play everything that you are in order to grow and sustain it. I've always said that my greatest talent is that of knowing how to work hard in a certain way, of being able to seek to improve myself day by day in training. And I think that's something that will always beat talent. Yeah, because who I am, many people tell me, among them my father, I'm a perfectionist because I work every day to try and be the best I can. And to be able to improve that, to perfect it, if I can see that I'm doing something not in the best way possible, I work every day, even for a year, until I can get it done perfectly, the way that I want to do it. In the work we do, every centimetre is important. For a pass or for a shot, even 2 centimetres can throw it off. So you have to be concentrated and to see everything you do to perfect your craft in order to reach even greater results every time. So, Antonio, what does it mean that even knowing how to be able to work hard is a talent? So, look, I agree completely. I've always, from a young age, I was quite headstrong, because once you get to certain levels, we all have talent. We're all lucky enough to have a talent, but here you see who's able to use it best and who not. You can tell. I've always liked being headstrong, arriving at my limit and doing whatever I want, working hard. So I think the difference is really obvious. You know, we all know where we came from, where we're going, and the difference is the work you put in, because your talent without hard work is worth nothing. So, Gregorio, let's ask him again for as long as he's still with us. Let's use him. So I wanted to ask him this one thing. Valentina was talking about the idea of schools as a place where you can harbour practicing sports. So you, like Pessina and like Antonio, you have this trait. You studied and you continued to study. You know, you studied political science at the same time while you were making your sporting career. It continued to be something important to you. Why? What do you see within this kind of journey you've made that helps and completes your athletic journey? So I find that simply I don't really want to, and I don't think to be known only as a swimmer. Life is more than that. Obviously, I like swimming. It's something it's the thing I do most kind of willingly in the world, but it's not everything about me. I've always been quite a curious person. I've always wanted to learn, especially things that interest me. Having finished scientific high school, I thought to sign myself up for, even if I wasn't to end, but in Italy it's certainly quite hard to do both things at the same time and do them properly. So I signed up, I started doing it, but I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't manage to do properly both things. I didn't have any time left, and it's definitely super hard to do both, so I had to leave one. I had to focus myself on swimming, but I still think that even for sporting at a high level, you can still have time to do anything. I've had time to study, to visit abroad, to travel, and it's been brilliant. So one last question, because I know you need to go soon. I wanted to ask you, even if we'll have millions of questions to ask you, let's just limit ourselves to this final one. I wanted to ask you if the experience you've lived in these past weeks, these Olympics, and the way that you've had to deal with them in such a strange way, have they changed you in any way? Do you think you're different to how you were 3 months ago? And if yes, how? So nothing. I'm sorry. I have to leave. I've got another commitment now, but I promise as soon as I can, I'll be back in person. We'll take that. You'll take your word for it then. We've got a room full of witnesses here, so we'll wait for you next year, just like we'll wait for Antonio. you'll find us here. So I was saying that certainly it's changed me. It's been a huge, possibly a fundamental change in my sporting career. You live in a way, an idea that you get to the Olympics just once every 4 years, which is different for football, which you participate every week. We have one important race, then there are the Worlds and the European Championship, but you live in the hope of reaching that point, that Olympics, at the peak of your physical condition. You have to be glowing, absolutely perfect. And so my Olympic dream even when I was young, was to arrive at that point and be perfect. And then you reach at that point and it's never like that. You get to your main task. There's always something missing. You think you could have done better. So for me, I think it's important it's right to seek perfection. It's something we do every day and I try and do. But you have to be able to adapt to your situation. And it's always a great virtue of sports people that obviously it's easy to win when you're in peak physical condition on your good day, but you have to be able to demonstrate that even when you're in bad days, when you're down. If you're not feeling at your best, like I couldn't do everything possible because I was unwell. But either way, I turned up, I participated, I sorted myself out, and I committed to giving 100%. And for me, that's a great lesson. Not everything can always go perfect, but for us, there's always a chance to fight. So this is something that I take from these Olympics. I'm super proud to have taken part. I'd love to have won 3 gold medals and done spectacular things. Obviously, I didn't, but I'm still very proud of everything I've done. Thank you, Gregorio. Thank you, and we'll say goodbye to you now. We await your future victories, and we hope to see you here next year then. So now let's call again Matteo Pessina, because we asked him a question on what does it mean after everything that's happened to being more famous than later, to be in a way an example for people. Does it feel like he's a role model for the fans and for young people who follow him? Let's see what he answered to that question. Yes, I think that study for me is a kind of a way to detach from everything I do every day, to relax, because it allows me to understand that there's more in the world than football, to kind of let go in my head and think about other things, think about my future especially, because we do one of the best jobs in the world, but it's also one of the shortest careers out there, because around 36, 37 you're retiring. So you have to be able to know how to do something else in order to carry on. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to build my future already. And now, exactly, the ability to be able to disconnect and think about something else and see myself as a student who has fun and plays football. I like it a lot. So let's go back to our previous topic. How helpful is it to have, let's call them witnesses of what sport can be? How useful is it to be able to disconnect, to get off the sofa, to boost our passion for sport, give our desire to get involved? So I feel like after this great summer, which isn't over yet, obviously, like I've said, on Tuesday, we'll start the Paralympics soon. And I'm certain that us Italians will be following with the same passion we followed all these other great events from June onwards. And these great events, these great champions, can help pull so many young people towards sports. I remember after every Olympics, the fencing had a notable increase in members and participants, and this is great. The emotion that comes from this, if we feel like we're role models for people, well, a champion has a fundamental role, that of being a positive role model, and to help people understand through their work that talent, like they've said, without hard work goes nowhere. I was the first for many, many years to get in the gym and the last one to leave. And also the last day of my career, which is the 26th of April, was in Rio de Janeiro in 2016. I was the first and the last to leave from the gym. And I think I left a model for my teammates, because even I grew within that team that worked which worked super hard. And I think it's important to be a role model, just like it's also important this duality of sport and school. Sadly today, a lot of people see, and I saw it personally, that sport is an obstacle to study. And from my point of view, an athlete that dedicates his afternoons to sports, but also as well as sports, should be taken as a role model, because a young person of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, up until the end of high school, he carries forwards 2 complex activities and is managed to organize his own time. This is what sport teaches them. And this must be seen and shown to teachers, because it's absolutely important. And that's one of my objectives here, to try and allow athletes, high-level athletes, to carry forwards their university degrees, because it's very important for their development. And it happens in many places, like in England, in the United States, Australia. We saw it in Tokyo. I spoke with the Australian Minister for Sports. And in Australia, sport is central to school life. For 1 year, I was in Korea for a World Cup. An American athlete closed himself in a room to take a university exam. We have to allow our athletes that represent our country to be able to unite university and their sport at the same time, to be able to encourage their development as people. And we should bring sport to university level precisely for this, so that students who entering the adult world can do so with sports at the same time. This is what the government has as one of its goals, to improve the well-being of citizens, because through sport, you can do well in almost everything. So we'll have tens of questions that we can give to our guests, but time is short, so I wanted to touch one last thing, which is the situation we're in now. Because things are changing, and we've seen it in sports as well. So we asked Matteo Pessina his final contribution here on what it means in this time to play, given the pandemic situation we're all facing right now. So definitely the pandemic has changed our lives, both as people and as athletes. There have been lots of dynamics at play here, and luckily now there are fans back in the stadium. We can start to see them again. But it definitely taught us a lot. It made us aware that there are definitely more important things other than just the sport we do or the work we do. Because these things, definitely, a lot of bad things can happen, sadly. It's important to be able to take them in your stride, find solutions, and try and move on. Staying energized and recognizing that those near to you are the most important, and the rest, all that. So, Antonio Giovinazzi, what have you learnt? What have you discovered? What are you still discovering in these days of the pandemic, in which you're required to, which has forced you to revolutionize everything? So you personally, what have you learnt from this situation about yourself? So it's been a very difficult situation for everyone. The fact that there isn't no longer we're busy in our calendar. In Japan, we don't know what we're going to do after that. But especially, it's been difficult to spend so much time, especially for us sports people, to spend so long at home. We're used to traveling a lot without, not being able to leave to do anything. It's been very difficult, because the most part of athletes you had a chance to stay at home. The chance to be at home with your family, with your friends, is normally quite little. So now it's been, because it's difficult to travel, to keep everything together, it's been a very difficult time. But it's been equally hard for everyone, like Matteo said. It's been quite strange. I remember last year, the Monza GP, which I'd done in 2019, was my first GP, how amazing that was, and how great having home supporters was. And to find me the next year at Monza without any supporters, any fans, was super hard. So we've definitely learned a lot from this, to learn what's important and who's important in this, because the people who've been close to us, especially those that you want to stick with in future, the ones you always find near to yourself. And I hope that we can learn from this, and we can go to Monza and we can have some fans there. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier, that without the fans who push you, who support you, there's something missing, and they're the ones who kind of drive you to get to the next step, to prepare yourself for the next race. Well, when you hear the fans shout, everyone goes crazy for Giovinazzi, yeah, it's another thing, it's important. So, everything goes towards the reopening of society. You know, we've learnt a lot, like we've heard here, from one another. We all hope to restart soon. So I wanted to ask one final question, thanking everyone. Question to Valentina, a very dry response here. How can we help each other to restart? Not just to get up from the sofa and everything. We've been talking about the role of institutions, what the state can do, but us personally, every single one of us, how can we give a positive contribution to help restart this machine, this great machine of sport? So I think every single one of us can give their own contribution to this new beginning, to kind of go back to the semblance of normality, even if it won't be the same as before. Bearing in mind that our behavior can affect the lives and the health of those around us. So I think it's fundamental to respect the projected guidelines that the government's going to give out. And it's absolutely important, if we can try and hope to return to normalcy, to follow these rules. So, like we've said, from today, 50% of the capacity at events, and hopefully we'll soon be reaching full. But this is just the starting point. I hope from soon we can increase. Obviously, we have to stay aware of what the situation on the ground is right now, but every single one of us, if we behave in the correct manner, I think we can help to give our own contribution, so to allow that as soon as possible stadiums can be full once again to capacity, and that all of us can finally return to normal life and take back something that's a great good for all of us, which we've learned to appreciate even more in this period of pandemic. Sport is really, it's intrinsic to health. It allows you to understand, to get to know what your own limits are. Personally, I've always worked on myself to go beyond. I've always put the bar even higher, because it's amazing to give yourself roles and to give us goals. And we should never just lock ourselves away, but should always try and increase ourselves and in how good we are in sports. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. I think today's event has been a great incentive to get up from the sofa, not only to go to the stadium once again, but just for this courage to say I, is to accept the challenge of getting involved, of being active. Maybe we won't get it, obviously we can't all get an Olympic gold, everyone here, or we won't get to the European final to score a penalty, who knows, but we can all, every single one of us, live this experience we've heard our guests talk about today, to live in a kind of fullness of discovering who we are by getting ourselves out there. So we thank our guests once again, Antonio Giovinazzi. And I hope as soon as possible to be there with you in person. And we'll await for you the next year. Let's thank again Valentina Vezzali, Undersecretary for Sport, and we encourage her in her battle for sport. And we thank all of you who've been joining us in person or online. A great way to participate is to help in places like this, like the meeting. Remember, the meeting lives on the work, the contributions of people who are present. If you can, please, we encourage you to donate so that the meeting can continue. So, as it stands, enjoy this rest of the week and have a great day. Thank you very much, everyone.